Manager panicked over the millionaire's Mandarin. Then the black maid responded in perfect Chinese. The marble lobby gleamed as though it had been polished for royalty. Every chandelier sparkled, every flower arrangement was aligned, every staff member forced into smiles that didn't reach their eyes. But all of it began to crack the moment the man in the charcoal suit stepped through the revolving door. Mr. John didn't slow his stride as his entourage poured in behind him. Their leather portfolios brushed against one another, their voices low and clipped in rapid Mandarin. At the front, the hotel's general manager straightened his tie twice before stretching out his hand. "Welcome to the Wellington Palace Hotel, Mr. Zhang. We are honored." The greeting collapsed before it even finished. Mr. Zhang's reply came swift, sharp, and layered in tones the manager couldn't follow. For a heartbeat, he kept his plastic smile, nodding as if he understood. But sweat darkened the collar of his shirt, betraying him. He fumbled for his phone. Fingers shook as he stabbed at the translation app, lifting it like a lifeline. The phone whirred, processed, and then spat out words so butchered that even the billionaire winced. The air tightened. The manager's heart thumped audibly against his ribs, echoing in the silence that followed. He cleared his throat. I'm sorry, Mr. Zhang. None of our staff speak Mandarin." That single admission landed heavier than a dropped suitcase. Every associate in the entourage exchanged a glance. Portfolios snapped closed, a briefcase shifted in someone's grip. Mr. Zhang's expression flattened, unreadable yet undeniably cold. The manager swallowed hard, eyes darting left and right for rescue. There was none. His team stood frozen behind him, rehearsed smiles already faltering. And in that silence, barely noticed, rolled the sound of squeaking wheels. A housekeeping cart slipped along the lobby's polished edge. The woman pushing it kept her eyes down, her gray uniform a shield of invisibility. She was no more than background, or so everyone thought. Her hand brushed against a cloth, her body angled toward the grand entrance, but her ears absorbed every syllable Mr. Zhang had spoken. Her lips moved just slightly, repeating his Mandarin under her breath with flawless cadence. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever noticed. They only saw a maid. What they couldn't see were the degrees that lined the wall of her tiny apartment, one from Harvard, another from Beijing University. They couldn't see the journals stacked by her bedside, filled with notes on international trade. They couldn't see the debt statements that had forced her into this job, wiping fingerprints from gold-plated doorknobs. And in this moment, as the general manager's career trembled, as a multi-million-dollar deal began to slip through his hands, the quiet woman with the cart carried within her the one skill that could change everything. The chandelier glittered overhead. The air held its breath. The manager's phone glitched again, producing gibberish that sent a ripple of suppressed laughter through Mr. Zhang's team. The manager's face drained of color. He didn't know it yet, but the maid he had ordered to remain invisible was about to become the most important person in the building. In the next hour, she would decide the fate of millions. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ so you never miss another true story that cuts this deep. And tell me in the comments which country you're watching from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. Luxury hotels have a strange rule. The more elegant the property, the more invisible the workers are expected to be. Guests arrive through revolving doors that spin like gateways to another world. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, polished brass railings. Yet none of it exists without hands that scrub, polish, and wipe until their bodies ache. And still, those same hands are expected never to be seen. For Olivia, invisibility wasn't just a job requirement. It had become a cloak the world wrapped around her. She moved past executives in tailored suits, carrying their coffee orders, their dry-cleaned garments, their waste bins emptied without a trace. And when those same executives spoke about talent, she was never what they meant. Racism and classism carve people into categories. At hotels like the Wellington, black women like Olivia were slotted into the lowest ones. No one imagined she had studied Mandarin at Beijing University. No one imagined she held a Harvard degree. And no one imagined she could stand in the same room as billionaires and hold her own in a conversation about global finance. They saw only the uniform, gray, starched, with a name tag clipped to the chest. Her story wasn't unusual in America. Black women carry some of the highest levels of student debt, even while earning degrees that, on paper, should have guaranteed them places in boardrooms. Olivia had sent out over 300 applications after finishing her master's. She'd sat in interviews where smiles curdled when she walked in, where hiring managers praised her credentials, but questioned whether she was the right cultural fit. That phrase, cultural fit, was a polite no. It meant they didn't want someone who looked like her sitting at their conference table. Bills didn't care about bias. Rent didn't care about discrimination. The notices from her student loan servicer stacked higher each month until she took the housekeeping job she swore would be temporary. 4 years later, the uniform clung to her like a second skin. She had become expert at silence. She polished mirrors while translating Mandarin newspapers under her breath. She vacuumed sweets while reciting economic policy analysis from memory. Her brilliance stayed locked behind lips that had learned the penalty of speaking up in the wrong room. What cut deepest wasn't just the money she earned, or didn't earn, it was being unseen. In a city that marketed diversity as its brand, she still felt erased. Guests walked past her as though she were furniture. Managers snapped orders without eye contact. Colleagues treated her intelligence as fantasy whenever it surfaced. And yet, invisibility gave her power too. It let her observe. She saw which businessmen drank too much before signing contracts. She knew which executives whispered about bribes disguised as fees. She memorized details others would never notice, because when no one sees you, they never imagine you're watching them. For Olivia, invisibility wasn't an identity, it was survival. But survival carried a price. Every night, she returned to a one-bedroom apartment where her degrees hung on the wall like quiet accusations. What good are we here? They seemed to ask. The truth is, America is filled with Olivias. Women who work behind counters, behind carts, behind doors that lock to the public. Women who hold advanced degrees but get asked to clean up after those with less knowledge and more opportunity. Women who are expected to smile, to serve, and to disappear. And at the Wellington Palace Hotel, on that afternoon when the marble floor reflected wealth and power, Olivia walked unseen through the very stage where her silence had been ordered. But silence would not last much longer. Because the same invisibility that kept her hidden was about to place her in the perfect position, close enough to hear every word that the manager could not. The break room smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee as the staff gathered, squeezed shoulder to shoulder on plastic chairs. Anxiety buzzed in the air, but only one man spoke. The general manager stood at the front, posture stiff as if carved from stone. His suit clung too tightly around his waist, but the tie was flawless, his shoes shined to a military gleam. He tapped a folder against his palm as if conducting a silent orchestra. "Mr. Zhang arrives at precisely 2 o'clock, he began, his voice clipped, carrying more warning than welcome. His investment group controls over 30 properties across Asia. If he adds the Wellington to his portfolio, it could mean expansion on a global scale. This is not just another guest. This is the guest." Heads nodded all around. The head chef mentioned the special menu of Chinese delicacies. The maintenance supervisor assured the air conditioning was set exactly as requested. The concierge boasted about VIP reservations made at the city's top venues. Every detail rehearsed, every face eager for approval. Then came the question that unsettled the performance. A front desk attendant raised her hand slowly. "Sir, I heard Mr. Zhang prefers speaking in Mandarin. Should we arrange for a translator?" The room shifted. It was a fair point, obvious even, but the manager's face tightened and he gave a dismissive wave. Completely unnecessary. His assistant assured me he speaks English perfectly well. Besides, he held up his phone, brandishing it like a sword. "We have the latest translation software. It's more than enough. Nearly human, nearly human." The phrase hung bitterly. Olivia, standing near the back with her housekeeping apron folded neatly, lowered her gaze. She could have spoken up, could have offered the language skills she carried like unclaimed luggage. But she already knew the cost. As if reading her silence, the manager's eyes flicked toward the cluster of housekeeping staff. His tone sharpened. "And as for you, your job is to remain unseen. Rooms must appear to clean themselves. Guests should never witness the labor. You are not here to be part of the performance. You are here to disappear." The words struck Olivia harder than any command. Disappear. Erase yourself so others can shine. She felt the familiar sting, the reminder that to him, she wasn't a person with intelligence or dreams. She was a function, a background prop, a body in a gray uniform whose presence had to be erased for the hotel to seem flawless. The others nodded, trained obedience, written into their posture. But Olivia kept her eyes on the tiled floor, her mind whispering the Mandarin translation of every sentence spoken around her, as though practicing for a conversation no one believed she could ever be part of. The manager continued his speech, pacing the room with growing energy. He detailed seating arrangements, how staff should stand at exact angles in the lobby, when to lower their heads, when to plaster on the smile. Every movement was a choreography of subservience designed to impress the billionaire who hadn't even arrived. And yet beneath his sharp tone, there was desperation. His career rested on this meeting. The corporate office had dangled a promotion if he succeeded. He was gambling everything, his reputation, his future, on a performance stitched together with fake confidence and a phone app he barely understood. Still, he masked that panic with arrogance. He scolded the bellhops for their posture. He ordered the maitre d' to repolish the silver service. He even demanded the floral arrangements be rotated so that the fullest blossoms faced outward. It was obsession disguised as authority. But authority without humility always frays. Olivia wheeled her cart out of the room after the meeting, the words echoing behind her. Housekeeping stays invisible. It was an instruction she had heard countless times, but today it rang differently. There was a tremor beneath it, like a structure about to crack. Because arrogance has a way of building glass towers, tall, gleaming, and impressive from a distance. But glass doesn't bend, it shatters. And in the hours to come, the manager's tower would begin to splinter under the weight of his own pride. He believed translation apps were enough. He believed staff like Olivia were expendable. He believed arrogance could substitute for preparation. And everyone in that break room could feel it. The creeping sense that when Mr. Jiang arrived, something was bound to go wrong. Far from the glitter of the Wellington's chandeliers, Olivia's world was contained within 4 narrow walls. Her apartment sat above a convenience store where the hum of freezers never stopped and the glow of neon signs leaked through thin curtains. Inside, the space carried no luxury, just stacks of overdue envelopes, secondhand furniture, and a bookshelf groaning under the weight of knowledge most people around her never guessed she owned. On those shelves rested Chinese poetry anthologies, trade policy manuals, and dictionaries whose pages were worn from constant use. Between them, her framed diplomas looked almost out of place. Harvard and Beijing University, 2 names that should have opened doors, but had instead become decorations on a wall nobody else ever visited. Each morning before she left for the hotel, she stood in front of those frames. Sometimes her hand lingered against the glass, as though to reassure herself it hadn't all been a dream. She still remembered the pride on graduation day, the belief that with enough intelligence and work, opportunity would follow. What followed instead were rejections, polite but firm. Interview after interview, Olivia watched eyes flicker with doubt the moment she entered the room. Too black, too female, too much of a reminder that brilliance doesn't always come in the package they expect. Bills piled while promises evaporated. So she took the job scrubbing floors and stripping beds, swearing it would be temporary. But temporary became 4 years. 4 years of watching others win contracts, others sign deals, while she changed linens and scrubbed away toothpaste from marble sinks. At night, exhaustion fought with ambition. Her body ached from pushing the cleaning cart, but her mind refused to rest. She read Mandarin newspapers on her phone, translating phrases aloud until the words wrapped themselves into her dreams. She woke sometimes with Mandarin sentences still echoing in her head, only to step into a uniform that erased her identity the moment she entered the hotel. The dissonance hollowed her. By day, she bent low with bleach and rags. By night, she soared across continents through books connecting Beijing to Washington, Shanghai to New York. Yet in the eyes of guests and managers, she was only the maid. Invisible, disposable, What cut deepest wasn't only the disrespect, it was the knowledge that invisibility had been imposed on her not because of lack of skill, but because of her skin and her position. Guests assumed ignorance before she ever spoke. Colleagues assumed passivity before she ever acted. The same mouth fluent in Mandarin, Cantonese, and Japanese was reduced to, "Yes, sir? Of course, ma'am." Sometimes, when she folded sheets in the staff laundry room, she whispered to herself in Mandarin, just to remember who she truly was. It was her rebellion, soft and hidden, a reminder that her mind hadn't been erased, even if her presence had been. And still, beneath the books and the diplomas, reminders of another truth lay scattered on her kitchen table. Red stamped notices from loan companies. No matter how brilliant her essays, no matter how fluent her speech, the numbers demanded payment, and the Wellington paycheck was all she had. That tension, the gap between who she was and how the world saw her, pressed against her chest each day like a stone. She carried it with every bed she made, every floor she scrubbed. Yet sometimes, when she glanced at her reflection in the bathroom mirrors she polished, she almost smiled. Because she knew something no one else did. She wasn't invisible. She was waiting. And in a matter of hours, the waiting would end. The Wellington lobby had been staged like a theater set. Staff stood at their posts, shoulders square, eyes bright. Every smile sharpened into something almost mechanical. The floral arrangements were refreshed, the air perfumed with jasmine and white tea, and the grand chandelier blazed at full brilliance. The manager took his position at the entrance, tugging his jacket once more, whispering to himself as though rehearsing a line. Then the black SUVs rolled up to the circular drive, and the performance began. Mr. Jiang stepped out first, his tailored charcoal suit falling against him like armor. He carried himself with the composure of someone long accustomed to being the most powerful man in any room. His red tie struck a deliberate contrast, bold as a banner. Behind him, 6 associates moved in formation, their portfolios pressed neatly at their sides. Not one wasted a glance on the grandeur of the hotel. Their focus stayed firmly on him. "Mr. Jiang," the manager beamed, extending his hand. "Welcome to the Wellington Palace Hotel. We are honored to." The sentence froze midair. Mr. Jiang had already begun speaking, his Mandarin quick and pointed, his tone assessing as his eyes swept across the polished lobby. His associates responded in kind, voices overlapping in brisk exchange. The manager's practiced smile wavered. He gave a small laugh, shallow and strained, nodding as if he understood. But beads of sweat had already begun forming at his temple. He pressed forward anyway. Yes, of course, we've prepared everything to your specifications." The words were empty, and Mr. Jiang did not break stride. Behind them, staff shifted nervously. They could not follow the Mandarin, but they didn't need to. His tone was enough. Even before translation, authority resonates, and this was authority sharpened like a blade. At the edge of the lobby, unnoticed, Olivia pushed her cart. The wheels whispered across the marble, carrying her along the perimeter as she obeyed the command to remain invisible. Her eyes stayed low, but her ears were tuned sharply to every word, and she understood perfectly. "The architecture is acceptable," Mr. Jiang remarked to his team, his voice measured, "but I question whether they understand the depth of our expectations." Olivia's lips moved almost imperceptibly, repeating the Mandarin under her breath, letting the syllables slide across her tongue as naturally as breathing. Her body performed the motions of work, adjusting the duster, aligning bottles on her cart, while her mind translated line after line with flawless ease. The manager, oblivious, mistook silence for success. He gestured toward the suite elevators, rattling off promises about custom menus and conference accommodations. His tone was filled with desperation, disguised as hospitality. Every exaggerated bow, every sir and welcome, betrayed an unspoken assumption. Wealth must be coddled, power must be pleased, and anything outside his script was a problem to ignore. He had dismissed the idea of a translator, not because he believed in technology, but because he refused to believe a Chinese billionaire would ever test him in his own weakness. Pride had blinded him. Olivia felt the sting of it deeply. She had seen that same pride countless times, executives who thought their whiteness and their titles excused ignorance. Managers who believed the labor of black staff was background noise, bodies moving silently to keep the stage clean while others shined under the lights. Her heart tightened, but she kept her head bowed. Years of invisibility had trained her well. Still, inside, something shifted. Because unlike everyone else in that lobby, she already knew how this performance was going. Mr. Zhang was unimpressed. The entourage followed him into the elevator bay, their Mandarin layered with clipped remarks about detail, about quality, about credibility. The manager trailed close behind, forcing laughter that never touched his eyes, nodding, agreeing, promising, never realizing how hollow it all sounded. Only Olivia caught the truth. She caught it in every syllable, in every frown exchanged between associates. She caught it because Mandarin was as natural to her as English, and because she had spent years listening to the unspoken words behind polished gestures. As the elevator doors closed with a soft hiss, silence fell heavy in the lobby. The staff exhaled as though relieved. The manager smoothed his jacket again, muttering, "Perfect. Everything under control." But it wasn't. Olivia's grip tightened on the cart handle. She didn't need a translation app to tell her what Mr. Zhang really thought of the hotel. She already knew, because she had understood every single word. The conference room on the top floor had been staged for triumph. Leather portfolios were laid out like trophies, crystal water glasses glistened under recessed lights, and a panoramic view of the skyline stretched behind the long mahogany table. The manager entered with rehearsed confidence, his suit pressed, his hair combed to perfection, his smile forced into something just shy of desperation. "Mr. Zhang," he said, extending both arms as if welcoming royalty, "today we present the Wellington's future, our vision for global expansion." His words were met with silence, then a quick volley of Mandarin from Mr. Zhang. The billionaire's eyes swept across the documents, his brow furrowing. His associates leaned close, whispering in the same sharp rhythm of syllables. The manager's smile twitched. He glanced at his team, then fumbled for his phone again. "One moment," he murmured, speaking into the translation app with shaky enunciation. "Mr. Zhang, could you please repeat your concern about tax structures?" The phone whirred, glitched, and delivered its verdict: chicken tax hotel mooncake. For a beat, silence. Then the muffled sound of an associate stifling laughter. Another coughed into his fist. Mr. Zhang's expression hardened, the kind of look that could shatter negotiations with nothing more than a crease of disapproval. The manager flushed crimson. Let me try again," he stammered, leaning toward the device as though sheer proximity could fix the problem. He repeated his words slower, clearer, his voice trembling with effort. The phone responded, "Foreign money tree law change important now." One of the associates pressed his lips together, shoulders shaking with the effort not to laugh outright. The humiliation thickened like smoke. The manager tugged at his collar, a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. He forced a chuckle. Ah, technology, always unpredictable. But the joke didn't land. Mr. Zhang's patience thinned visibly, his questions growing longer, sharper, each sentence layered with technical references to zoning regulations, foreign investment restrictions, and regional tax codes. His assistant translated selectively, smoothing some edges but leaving the core of the critique intact. The Wellington appeared unprepared. The manager scrambled. He launched into his presentation, pointing at graphs and charts projected on the screen. Revenue projections, market share, expansion strategies. He spoke with grand gestures, his voice rising as though volume could disguise ignorance. But every attempt to reassert authority dissolved the moment Mandarin cut across the room again. Olivia stood just outside the conference doors, polishing a brass railing she had already cleaned twice. Through the thin crack, she caught the cadence of every word. She winced at the translations mangled into absurdity, the rising frustration in Mr. Zhang's tone, the laughter his associates tried to contain. She knew exactly what they were saying. They have no grasp of the tax shifts. Their plan is shallow. They waste our time. And still, the manager clung to arrogance like a life raft. He refused to admit the truth, that his pride in technology had left him unprepared, that dismissing a translator had been a fatal mistake. Sweat stained the underarms of his crisp white shirt. His tie, once perfectly knotted, sagged slightly as he loosened it under the heat of humiliation. He dabbed at his forehead with a handkerchief, leaving faint streaks of dampness on the silk. Each movement carried a grotesque intensity, as if his own body were betraying the illusion of control. The associates exchanged glances. Phones appeared discreetly under the table as they messaged, likely about alternative hotels. Mr. Zhang's fingers drummed on his portfolio, a rhythm that echoed finality. The manager's voice cracked. "Perhaps we should take a short recess," he suggested, his laugh thin and brittle. "I can have our specialist join us to provide additional clarity." The words were translated back to Mr. Zhang, whose expression barely shifted. His curt reply landed like a hammer. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to salvage a meeting already slipping through his grasp. Outside the room, the staff huddled in nervous clusters, whispering. Everyone sensed the collapse coming, and Olivia, still standing with her cleaning cart, felt the weight of it heavier than anyone. Because unlike the rest, she knew the details of Mr. Zhang's condemnation. She could hear the disbelief in his voice, the dismissal woven into each phrase. The irony twisted deep. The manager's downfall was being written in a language he couldn't understand, while the one woman who could save him had been ordered to stay invisible. Back inside, the presentation stumbled further. Charts failed to impress, promises rang hollow, and every misstep widened the gulf between the Wellington and the billionaire's trust. The manager wiped his brow again, his handkerchief now soaked. His eyes darted between his team and his phone, searching for answers that refused to appear. And through it all, Olivia translated silently under her breath, her whisper soft but precise. Each word sharpened the truth. The deal was collapsing, and arrogance was to blame. The muffled voices from the conference room carried into the hallway like a current. Olivia stood with her cleaning cart parked against the wall, her fingers pressed against the cool brass of the handle. She could hear it all, the clipped tones of Mandarin, the strained laugh of the manager, the sound of portfolios closing with finality. Every word painted the same picture. The deal was slipping away. Her chest tightened. She knew she could stop it. She knew that with one sentence, one carefully spoken phrase in Mandarin, she could turn the entire meeting on its head. But what would that cost her? For years, she had trained herself to disappear. Invisible labor kept her safe, even if it cost her dignity. Managers praised her silence, not her skill. To speak now would be to break the very rule drilled into her since her first day on the job. Housekeeping is seen only when it fails, and failure had a price. She had rent due, loan payments overdue, groceries to stretch through the week. If the manager chose to retaliate, and she knew he would, her job could vanish. For someone already hanging by a thread, unemployment wasn't a risk she could afford. Yet standing still meant watching opportunity evaporate before her eyes. Not just opportunity for the hotel, but for herself. Olivia's entire life had been built on knowledge no one wanted to see. She spoke 3 languages fluently, but at the Wellington, her tongue was reduced to, "Yes, sir," and "Right away, ma'am." She could dissect tax policy in China, but here she scrubbed sinks until her hands cracked. Her breath caught as Mr. Zhang's voice rose sharply on the other side of the door. She didn't need to hear the translation to know his patience had snapped. His words, clear and unsoftened, rang in her mind. "They are wasting our time. They don't understand us." This is unprofessional. A wave of shame swept over her, though she wasn't the one failing. Still, the sting was personal. She knew what it meant to be dismissed, to be labeled inadequate because of someone else's prejudice. The manager had mocked the idea of needing a translator, had mocked her and every worker who carried skills invisible to him. He trusted a phone over a human being who looked like her. Her heart pounded. She could stay silent, as always. She could let him drown in his arrogance and watch the deal collapse. She could remain the invisible maid, pushing her cart to the next corridor, whispering translations only to herself. Or she could step in. She could risk the humiliation, the reprimand, even the loss of her job, for the chance to reclaim her voice. Her palms were slick with sweat. The decision weighed heavier than any cart she had ever pushed. She had seconds, only seconds, before the manager returned to the room, empty-handed, exposed, undone. In those seconds, Olivia thought of her apartment wall, lined with diplomas that no one valued. She thought of her mother's words before graduation. "You'll have to fight twice as hard, and even then, they may never see you." She thought of every guest who walked past her, as though she were part of the wallpaper. And she thought of Mr. Zhang, his Mandarin precise, his questions sharp. He didn't see her either. Not yet. But she could make him see. Her hand tightened on the cart, her pulse hammered in her throat, her body swayed forward, then pulled back. Silence meant survival. Speaking meant everything else. The doorknob turned. The manager stepped out, face pale, sweat dripping down his temples, his tie hanging loose like a noose around his neck. He hissed into his phone, desperate for help that wasn't coming. Olivia drew a breath so deep it burned. The moment had come. She had to choose. The conference room pulsed with tension, as if the air itself carried weight. Mr. Jiang leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable, while his associates traded glances. Their Mandarin was no longer curious, no longer cautious, it was damning. Olivia caught every word through the door. They're unprepared. They're wasting our time. This hotel isn't serious. The manager stumbled through his charts, his once polished voice now cracking. His collar was damp, his forehead glistened, and his handkerchief was already soaked through. Each second felt like a nail hammered into the coffin of his career. Olivia's breath quickened. She knew she couldn't stay silent. Not now. Not when the man who had dismissed her as invisible was unraveling under the very arrogance that had kept her muted for years. She placed her cloth down on the cart and moved toward the door, each step small but deliberate. Inside, the manager grasped at straws. He waved toward a bar graph projected on the screen. As you can see, our revenue projections demonstrate steady growth over the next 5 years. His words faltered as Mr. Jiang's associate leaned forward, firing a rapid question in Mandarin about foreign tax codes. The manager froze. He pressed his phone again, the app producing its broken response. Chicken Market Hotel Law Moon Festival. Laughter rippled this time, no longer suppressed. The billionaire's lips pressed into a line. His patience was gone. And then, before the manager could humiliate himself further, another voice filled the room. Fluent, steady, and unmistakably confident. Olivia stepped through the doorway, her gray uniform catching the light, her voice carrying in perfect Mandarin. Mr. Jiang, you're asking about the revised foreign investment tax structures and how they affect integrated hotel retail properties in this region. The change reduces exemptions but creates new pathways for long-term equity partnerships. The room went silent. Every head turned. The associates stopped mid-breath, their pens frozen above paper. Mr. Jiang's eyes widened, not in offense, but in recognition of accuracy, of fluency, of authority. Olivia stood by her cart, her posture calm, her words precise. She didn't smile. She didn't shrink. She spoke as though she belonged at the table, as though she had always belonged. Mr. Jiang tilted his head, then responded in Mandarin. His question came faster, layered with technical vocabulary about zoning laws and comparative business environments between Shanghai and New York. Olivia answered without pause, her tone smooth. Yes, the zoning regulations here differ, but allowances for mixed-use development could offer opportunities similar to Shanghai's expansion models. Your investment could leverage both hospitality and retail, maximizing returns. Another silence. Then one of the associates let out a low whistle of surprise. The manager's jaw fell open, his face drained of color. This maid he had ordered to remain invisible was rescuing the very meeting he had destroyed. And worse, every eye in the room was no longer on him. They were on her. Who is this? He stammered, his voice shrill. Mr. Jiang ignored him. His attention never left Olivia. He asked another question, sharper, testing her depth. She replied again with confidence, weaving policy and cultural nuance into her response. Her Mandarin carried the ease of someone who not only studied the language, but lived it, breathed it, understood it. And with each exchange, the room shifted. Associates who moments ago laughed at the manager's incompetence now leaned forward, pens scratching furiously to capture her insights. Respect replaced ridicule, curiosity replaced dismissal. The manager trembled. He tugged at his tie, sweat dripping from his chin, his hands clutching the back of a chair as though it were the only thing holding him upright. His entire career now depended on the one person he had treated as disposable. Olivia glanced at him once briefly, her eyes sharp but unreadable. She said nothing in English, no explanation, no apology. She simply turned back to Mr. Jiang and continued in Mandarin, dismantling every barrier the manager had built with his arrogance. The silence after her final answer was the kind that electrified the skin. Goosebumps rippled across the staff who had peeked into the room from the hallway, unable to believe what they were witnessing. For years, Olivia had been forced into invisibility. But in that moment, with her voice ringing flawless and unshaken, invisibility died. Mr. Jiang leaned back, nodded once, and spoke softly to his associates. They nodded in return, their demeanor transformed. Respect had replaced doubt, interest had replaced irritation, and the maid, the one ordered to vanish, now stood as the only person who mattered in the room. The manager's breath came shallow, his lips twitching, his body heavy with dread. He realized the truth in real time. His survival no longer depended on his title, his presentation, or his connections. It depended on her. The weight of the room had shifted. Just minutes earlier, laughter lingered in the corners, directed at the manager's fumbling translations and hollow confidence. Now silence reigned, not the silence of dismissal, but the silence of recognition. Every eye remained on Olivia, the maid who had spoken with more clarity than anyone expected. Mr. Jiang leaned forward, his sharp gaze narrowing, not in disdain but in assessment. His next question came fast, layered with legal nuance. What of the new restrictions on foreign investment in mixed-use developments here? Do they align with our long-term hotel strategies? Olivia didn't falter. Her voice, steady and flawless Mandarin, cut through the tension like glass through fabric. Yes, the restrictions narrow the field for short-term speculation, but for groups with long-term holdings like yours, they actually reduce competition. It allows those who commit fully to dominate the market with fewer rivals. Your model would thrive here if adapted correctly. Mr. Jiang's lips curved faintly, almost approval. He nodded once. Another associate pressed her. And taxation across jurisdictions? How do exemptions here compare to Shanghai's? Olivia lifted her chin slightly, her words flowing with authority. While Shanghai offers broader exemptions, the U.S. environment provides stability and legal protection. The recent amendments in this region introduce incentives for integrated retail hospitality models. By pairing your hotel brand with flagship retail, you maximize both visibility and returns. The associate scribbled notes, head bobbing in agreement. The manager stood frozen, his body betraying him. Sweat pooled at his collar, his hands trembling as they gripped the table. Every word Olivia spoke pushed him further into irrelevance. His plan, his charts, his graphs, all of it had become background noise. The voice of power no longer belonged to him. And that was the unspoken truth vibrating through the room. A black maid, dressed in a gray uniform, was now the most commanding presence in a boardroom of billionaires. The reversal cut deeper because it exposed what arrogance had buried. The manager had chosen to trust machines over human skill, whiteness over black intelligence, hierarchy over dignity. And yet the very person he treated as disposable was the only one capable of salvaging what he had nearly destroyed. Mr. Jiang asked again, more direct now, bypassing the manager entirely. And labor markets. How does the U.S. hospitality sector compare in flexibility to ours? Olivia's answer flowed without hesitation. Labor laws here are stricter, but they also ensure stability. Employee retention programs are increasingly linked to brand reputation. An investment that emphasizes ethical labor practices will not only comply with regulations, but also position your group as a leader in socially responsible development. This time, Mr. Jiang smiled. The associates shifted in their seats, their demeanor no longer skeptical, but attentive, hungry for each detail Olivia laid out. She wasn't just translating words, she was offering solutions, strategy, and vision. She was no longer invisible. And in that moment, the power dynamics crystallized. Race, class, and hierarchy were turned upside down. The man in the tailored suit, sweating under the weight of his arrogance, had become irrelevant. The woman in the gray uniform, dismissed as background labor, now commanded the respect of the richest man in the room. Olivia didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her authority came not from title or appearance, but from knowledge, from a fluency that bridged cultures and economies. And for the first time, her brilliance was undeniable. The manager's throat worked as he tried to interject. Yes, well, exactly what I was going to say. But the interruption died when Mr. Jiang lifted his hand, eyes fixed solely on Olivia. No one laughed now. No one dismissed her. Naomi's reflection sharpened the moment. Years of racism and classism had forced Olivia into the shadows, but when her voice broke through, it carried the weight of truth. Invisibility had been a prison. Now it was broken glass at her feet. Mr. Jiang leaned back, nodding again with a faint smile of approval. Respect had been won, not begged for, and it hadn't been earned by the man in the suit, but by the maid who refused to stay silent. The manager's hands shook as he shuffled the untouched portfolios on the table, trying to reclaim the center he had already lost. His throat cleared once, then twice, his voice straining for the authority that used to come easily. Yes, well, I believe what Olivia means is... But his interruption collapsed. Mr. Jiang didn't even turn his head. His gaze remained locked on Olivia, his next question delivered to her in Mandarin with effortless command. Olivia answered with the same steady fluency as before, her tone calm, her phrasing precise. She spoke of comparative markets, of regulatory stability, of long-term growth potential. She spoke not as a maid, but as an expert. The manager's jaw tightened. He tried again, forcing a laugh. Yes, exactly. That's precisely what I've been saying all along. No one acknowledged him. Not the associates, not Mr. Jiang. Their pens scratched only when Olivia spoke. Their nods came only after her sentences. Their silence fell only when she paused. The humiliation grew grotesque in its clarity. He stood in a $1,000 suit, his cufflinks flashing under the recessed lights, but the room no longer belonged to him. Every attempt to insert himself made the distance more obvious, as though each word he uttered pushed him further into irrelevance. Sweat stained through his shirt. His once pristine tie sagged. His posture collapsed, shoulders no longer square but hunched in defeat. And Olivia, still in her gray housekeeping uniform, name tag clipped to her chest, was the one who commanded the air. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't sought attention. All she had done was speak the truth in a language the others understood. That truth stripped the manager bare. For all his arrogance, all his dismissals, his authority dissolved the moment someone more capable dared to step into view. Mr. Jiang leaned forward, addressing Olivia directly. His tone had shifted, softer now, carrying a hint of respect. He asked for clarification about potential U.S. partnerships, about tax strategies that could benefit his group. And Olivia, without missing a beat, laid out her analysis. Every head turned toward her, listening, absorbing, impressed. The manager tried one final time, voice sharp with desperation. Mr. Jiang, I assure you the Wellington is fully prepared. But Mr. Jiang didn't even glance his way. His focus remained on Olivia, nodding slowly as she finished her point. In the hallway, staff who had gathered to watch could see it too. The shift was undeniable. A maid in a gray uniform had become the most powerful voice in the room, while the man in charge sank deeper into invisibility with every word he tried to steal back. And that was the cruel irony. He had demanded Olivia remain unseen, ordered her to disappear, mocked the idea of needing her. But the moment she was visible, his own presence evaporated. Naomi's reflection sharpened the truth. In that moment, a maid in a gray uniform held more authority than a man in a $1,000 suit. The room held the kind of silence that follows revelation. Mr. Jiang leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, eyes never leaving Olivia. Around him, associates whispered quietly, their pens moving swiftly, their glances darting between the maid who spoke like an economist and the manager who wilted like a dying plant at the edge of the table. Then, breaking the silence, Mr. Jiang spoke again in Mandarin. His words came unhurried, deliberate, heavy with authority. Olivia listened, nodded once, and replied with ease. Her answer wasn't just correct, it was layered, contextual, the kind of response that came only from deep study and lived fluency. Mr. Jiang's lips curved, not quite a smile but close. He turned to his associates, delivered a short command, and they immediately began making notes. Then he shifted his gaze back to Olivia and, in English this time, spoke clearly so everyone could hear. You should not be pushing a cart, you should be at this table. The manager's head snapped up, his eyes wide. Sir, I assure you she's simply a housekeeper. A valued staff member, yes, but... Mr. Jiang cut him off with a raised hand, not even sparing him a glance. His attention stayed fixed on Olivia. I need someone who understands both cultures, both languages, both economies. You do. You will work as my liaison here. Gasps rippled across the room. The executives who had rehearsed their smiles, polished their graphs, and spent weeks preparing for this moment now sat stunned, reduced to spectators in their own boardroom. Olivia's breath caught. Her hands gripped the edge of her cart as though anchoring her to the ground. She searched Mr. Jiang's face for any sign of mockery, but found only certainty. He wasn't offering charity, he was offering respect. The manager staggered forward, his voice trembling with outrage masked as politeness. "Mr. Jiang, surely you cannot mean she has no official role, no authority." But again his protest evaporated. Mr. Jiang spoke over him, addressing Olivia directly in Mandarin. "You understand the policies better than they do. You answered my questions with accuracy and vision. That is what I value. Will you accept the role?" Olivia swallowed hard. She could feel the weight of every eye on her, the disbelief, the shock, the resentment. For years, she had been told she was invisible, and now all of them saw her at once. Her reply came steady, her Mandarin firm. "If my skills can be of service, I will accept." Mr. Jiang nodded, satisfaction flashing briefly in his eyes. He gestured for his assistant to record the arrangement. The deal that had been slipping away minutes ago was now secured. Not because of the manager's presentation, but because a black maid refused to stay silent. The executives exchanged uneasy glances. Some looked at Olivia with awe, others with envy, still others with resentment they tried to mask. But none of them could deny what had happened. Power had shifted. The manager collapsed into his chair, his face pale, his career dissolving before his eyes. The title he had clung to meant nothing now. The promotion he dreamed of was gone, evaporated in the shadow of a maid's voice. Naomi's reflection cut deep. This wasn't just about one hotel or one billionaire. It was about every black woman in America told she wasn't enough. It was about every resume rejected before the interview, every degree questioned, every talent ignored because of the body that carried it. America is filled with Olivias, people with brilliance pressed down by arrogance, talent buried under prejudice. And sometimes it takes a single moment, a single voice breaking the rules of invisibility, to expose the lie that only certain people belong at the table. In that conference room, the truth was undeniable. A maid in a gray uniform had become the bridge between cultures, the voice of authority, the savior of $1 million deal. And for once, she wasn't invisible. That night, Olivia closed the door to her apartment and leaned against it, letting the silence settle around her. The hum from the store below pressed faintly through the floorboards, but it couldn't drown out the memory of the conference room. The silence after she spoke, the nod of respect for Mr. Jiang, the way every eye had shifted toward her. She set her cleaning cart keys on the counter, as she always did, but this time the gesture felt different. They no longer chained her to invisibility. For the first time, she wasn't only a maid with bills and debts. She was something more. Seen, heard, acknowledged. Her gaze lifted to the wall where her diplomas hung. The Harvard frame reflected a thin slice of light from the street lamp outside. The Beijing University certificate glowed faintly beneath it. For years, those papers had felt like accusations, proof of promises unkept, of brilliance wasted. Tonight, they felt like vindication. She had not been wrong to dream. The world had been wrong to dismiss her. Naomi's voice traced the deeper truth. In America, talent like Olivia's is too often buried under prejudice. The system rewards arrogance over humility, whiteness over skill, connections over merit. But every so often, justice cracks through, and the invisible are forced into view. At the Wellington, whispers had already begun. Staff carried stories down the service hallways, retelling how the maid had saved the deal while the manager drowned in sweat. By the end of the week, the tale spread through the city's business circles. A general manager so unprepared he lost his authority in front of a billionaire. The corporate office didn't fire him publicly. They didn't have to. His reputation dissolved quietly, his name attached forever to a failure people repeated like a cautionary tale. The very man who demanded that Olivia disappear became invisible himself. Olivia sat at her small desk, pulling out the same Mandarin journal she had read during breaks at the hotel. She ran her fingers across its pages, not as a student chasing opportunity, but as a woman who had finally proven her worth. Mr. Jiang's offer replayed in her mind. Not charity, not pity, but respect. For years she had been told to stay silent, to scrub until her hands cracked, to fold sheets until her back ached, to let her voice rot unspoken. But the moment she broke that silence, the room could no longer function without her. That was justice. Not the kind handed down in courts, but the kind born when dignity refuses to bow. The manager had once said she should remain unseen. Yet the moment he lost control, the very person he dismissed became the one everyone needed. His downfall was not orchestrated revenge, not sabotage. It was the natural consequence of arrogance colliding with truth. And truth had worn a maid's uniform. As Olivia traced her diploma with her fingertip, a quiet smile spread across her face. She had spent years trying to prove her worth to people who never wanted to see it. Now she no longer needed their validation. The world had seen her. Naomi's reflection lingered. Poetic justice isn't loud. It doesn't always come with headlines or applause. Sometimes it comes with whispers. Whispers that strip arrogance bare. Whispers that rewrite reputations. Whispers that finally shine a light on the people the world worked so hard to keep invisible. And in those whispers, Olivia's name now carried power. They thought she was invisible. But invisibility is only power hidden, waiting for its moment. Olivia had carried brilliance within her for years, wrapped in silence, concealed by a gray uniform that made her easy to dismiss. They told her to stay unseen, to erase herself so others could shine. Yet when the moment came, the silence broke, and the truth was undeniable. That truth goes beyond one hotel, one meeting, or one arrogant manager. It speaks to a larger story written every day across America. How many Black women, immigrants, and workers from marginalized communities walk into rooms filled with knowledge no one bothers to ask about? How many carry degrees, fluency, and skills that never make it past the biases of those who only see their skin color, their accent, their uniform? Olivia's story is not rare, it is common. The tragedy is that so many of these stories remain untold. Millions of people are pressed into invisibility, dismissed before they even open their mouths. The world misses out on their brilliance because prejudice blinds those in power. Naomi's reflection sharpens. Racism and classism do not always scream. Often they whisper in policies, in dismissals, in the word fit used to mask exclusion, in the casual arrogance of managers who think they know better. And those whispers cost opportunities. They cost lives. But what this story shows is that invisibility is not weakness. It is not absence. It is not lack. Invisibility is power, waiting for its moment to be seen. And when that moment comes, it does more than rescue a meeting. It exposes the lie that brilliance has one face, one accent, one color. Olivia spoke, and the world shifted, not because she begged for recognition, but because the truth could not be denied once it was heard. And so the question lingers for all of us. How many Olivias are still being ignored today? How many workers are dismissed as background, when in reality, they are carrying the answers to the problems leaders claim they cannot solve? This is why stories like this matter. They remind us that dignity cannot be erased, that justice does not always come through applause, but sometimes through the quiet breaking of silence. Now I want to turn to you. Have you ever been underestimated? Treated as though you didn't belong, only to prove that you were more capable than anyone realized? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story matters. When you tell it, you make someone else feel less alone. And if you believe, like I do, that dignity should never depend on skin color, language, or uniform, then take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ. Every story we share is part of a larger fight, a fight for visibility, for justice, and for the respect that every human being deserves. Join the community. Add your voice to the conversation, because invisibility only lasts until the truth is spoken, and when it is, no one can silence it again. They thought she was invisible, but invisibility was only power hidden, waiting for its moment, and that moment had come.